Bem-vindos à III Conferência Internacional Riscos, Segurança e Cidadania, uma organização da plataforma de Setúbal. Saudar o Sr. Presidente da Câmara, todos os demais presentes da Comissão Organizadora e, em nome da Comissão Organizadora desta conferência, uma saudação especial ao auditório, particularmente revestido de jovens, o que é muito significativo registarmos. Vamos dar início à conferência com a sessão de abertura e, assim, neste domínio, eu passava a palavra para uma primeira intervenção, Nuno Maia, em representação da Associação da Indústria da Península de Setúbal.
Ora viva, muito bom dia a todas e a todos, Sr. Presidente, caros organizadores, Sr. Capitão de Porto. Umas palavras muito breves. Em primeiro lugar, de congratulação por se realizar esta iniciativa, já vai na terceira edição. É um tema que não está habitualmente na agenda do dia, temas de riscos, segurança, cidadania, mas acho que devemos estar satisfeitos por haver uma entidade promovida aqui pelo município que se dedica a refletir, a pensar, a criar doutrina sobre isto e depois a refletir na ação concreta para mitigarmos estes riscos e termos uma melhor cultura de segurança. Partilho da satisfação do Dr. Eduardo Caldeira de ver tantos jovens aqui, porque a cidadania faz primeiramente a partir da formação e dos jovens e, portanto, é bom estarem aqui envolvidos neste tema. No caso aqui de Setúbal, temos uma indústria forte, portanto, a Associação da Indústria da Península de Setúbal representa as grandes empresas industriais aqui da Península e, felizmente, não temos, nas últimas décadas, manifestações graves de segurança industrial, portanto as coisas correm bem, mas não quer dizer que não estejamos atentos e participantes nestes temas e, embora a conferência deste ano se dedique mais ao tema do turismo, a segurança é uma preocupação grande das empresas industriais e, portanto, queremos manter a acompanhar este assunto. Temos os planos locais de adaptação às alterações climáticas. Como sabem, as alterações climáticas trazem riscos acrescidos, riscos de incêndio, de inundação. Temos tido, infelizmente, nos últimos anos, alguns episódios dessa natureza e, portanto, toda a reflexão que se faça sobre esse tema e a adaptação das nossas organizações, do nosso modo de vida e das políticas autárquicas a estas situações são bem-vindas e, por isso, resta-me desejar um bom trabalho, bons resultados desta conferência e renovo o agradecimento por estarmos aqui. Muito obrigado. Bom dia.
Uma segunda intervenção, chamaria então Pedro Ferreira, vice-presidente do Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. Cumprimento o Sr. Presidente da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal e, em seu nome, por favor, considerem-se todos cumprimentados. Primeiro, em nome do Instituto, quero congratular aqui estarmos depois de um tempo, um período de pandemia, em que esta conferência também sofreu por causa disso mesmo, estarmos aqui todos presentes in loco, a discutir e a analisar e a refletir sobre assuntos muito prementes e essenciais, não só para a região de Setúbal, mas também para a região, para toda a região e para todo o país. Quero congratular toda a Comissão Organizadora pelo excelente programa que já tive a oportunidade de constatar, está muito bem construído e de certeza que vamos todos, durante estes 2 dias, discutir e analisar aspectos importantíssimos e espero que nos possam dar respostas mais eficazes e eficientes, que são muito importantes para a comunidade. Também quero agradecer e felicitar todos os oradores e moderadores que se disponibilizaram para esta análise e reflexão durante estes 2 dias e desejo a todos uma boa conferência e bons trabalhos. Bom dia a todos.
Para encerrar a sessão de abertura, chamaria o Sr. Presidente da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal, André Martins.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. Muito bem-vindos a esta terceira Conferência de Segurança, Cidadania, Riscos e dedicado nesta terceira conferência, dedicado às questões da segurança e do turismo. Setúbal, de facto, é uma cidade, uma região também, aqui na área metropolitana, onde, ao longo dos anos, mas em particular nos últimos anos, apesar mesmo da pandemia, há uma apetência muito grande para o desenvolvimento do turismo. E também não podemos, por isso mesmo, ficar alheios a estas questões, a estes problemas, que são os problemas do nosso tempo e, certamente, os problemas de um futuro, pelo menos um futuro próximo. Queria, naturalmente, agradecer à Comissão organizadora desta terceira conferência, a todas as entidades que se quiseram associar, naturalmente, para abrilhantar, digamos assim, esta nossa conferência. Também, naturalmente, saudar todos os autarcas presentes, o Sr. Comandante do Porto, uma autoridade aqui na nossa cidade, tendo em conta a importância que o nosso rio tem, a nossa baía e, portanto, toda esta atração, como referia relativamente à apetência que há de tanta gente, felizmente, para frequentar o nosso território e em que, naturalmente, o mar, o nosso rio, são referências muito importantes. Por isso, muito obrigado também pela sua presença aqui. Queria, naturalmente, saudar toda esta juventude que hoje também participa aqui na nossa conferência, que são jovens que, eventualmente, pelo menos à partida, estão disponíveis para investir nesta questão da proteção civil, que é uma matéria também sempre muito interessante e que são questões a abordar neste âmbito da proteção civil que dizem respeito à nossa segurança, ao nosso bem-estar e ao nosso futuro. Ainda antes de vos dirigir algumas palavras sobre o que nos reúne aqui hoje, quero dar a todas e a todos, em especial aos que visitam esta cidade, eventualmente pela primeira vez, as boas-vindas a este Fórum Municipal Luísa Todi. Sei que terão, nos 2 dias em que decorre esta conferência, a oportunidade de aprofundar conhecimentos sobre o tema que aqui nos traz e, por isso, quero também, desde já, desejar-vos bom trabalho. Mas permitam que vos fale do assunto que motiva este nosso encontro. A evolução tecnológica e o contexto socioeconómico das sociedades contemporâneas impõem constantes aprofundamentos da problemática do risco. Foi com este objetivo central que a Câmara Municipal de Setúbal organizou em março de 2017 a primeira Conferência Internacional Riscos, Segurança e Cidadania. Adotámos então uma perspectiva multidisciplinar e alinhada com as organizações definidas pela estratégia de Sendai 2015-2030, visando a redução do risco de desastre e a criação de cidades resilientes. Na sequência da referida conferência, foi assinada em dezembro de 2017 um protocolo entre a Câmara Municipal de Setúbal, o Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal, o Instituto de Geografia e Ordenamento do Território da Universidade de Lisboa e o Centro de Estudos e Intervenção em Proteção Civil para a constituição do que designamos como Plataforma de Setúbal. Posteriormente, aderiram à plataforma de Setúbal o Instituto Superior de Ciências Sociais e Políticas da Universidade de Lisboa, a Associação da Indústria da Península de Setúbal, a Escola Profissional, do GEP, a Universidade Sénior de Setúbal, a Liga dos Amigos de Setúbal e Azeitão e a Associação dos Bombeiros Voluntários de Setúbal. Materializou-se desta forma uma parceria que envolve, além do município, a academia, a sociedade civil e agentes económicos. Nesta terceira Conferência Internacional, que aqui agora começa, continuamos a focar-nos e, na sequência da anterior edição, realizada em março de 2019, nas matérias do risco e da segurança, desta vez centradas no tema do turismo e segurança. Quisemos, assim, oferecer um evento multidisciplinar com o objetivo de partilha de conhecimento com vista à duração do risco, à redução do risco e ao estabelecimento de estratégias de segurança no cada vez mais relevante contexto da indústria do turismo. A trilogia Riscos, Segurança, Cidadania, que enquadra desde a primeira edição a organização destas conferências, protagoniza uma hierarquia de valores marcantes na dinâmica funcional das sociedades contemporâneas. A nova realidade global caracteriza-se pela necessidade da existência de sociedades interconectadas e em rede, em que as questões de segurança deixem de ser trabalhadas apenas no contexto do Estado Central. Pela sua proximidade, os órgãos de poder municipal possuem o necessário potencial para serem agentes promotores de sinergias e saberes para a edificação da segurança face ao risco. Partindo desta constatação, importa encontrar respostas eficazes e eficientes que reforcem as comunidades, bem como o conjunto de atividades económicas e sociais que se desenvolvem nos territórios. É nesta perspectiva que propomos a abordagem da temática do turismo e segurança, atendendo à particular relevância que este domínio representa enquanto recurso para a projeção e o desenvolvimento do país em geral e do município de Setúbal em particular. O programa desta conferência e a qualidade dos oradores que nela vão intervir constitui uma garantia de que este evento produzirá um conjunto de reflexões de referência para serem acolhidas no desenho de políticas potenciadoras do desenvolvimento do turismo e segurança. Estamos certos de que assim será. Resta-me, uma vez mais, agradecer a vossa participação nesta terceira Conferência Internacional de Riscos, Segurança e Cidadania e desejar-vos um bom trabalho. Muito obrigado pela vossa participação. Naturalmente que os resultados serão certamente muito animadores para encararmos um futuro com maior segurança e menos riscos. Muito obrigado.
Terminadas as intervenções, apenas alguns avisos ou algumas informações. Os senhores professores com acesso a créditos terão que, todos os dias da conferência, hoje e amanhã, assinar a folha de presenças que está disponível no secretariado da conferência, que aqui à entrada se localiza. Depois, nas sessões, os participantes, portanto, quem está a participar neste nosso congresso, poderão formular questões breves através de deverem descarregar a aplicação Pigeon, que basta fazer download no QR Code e, portanto, ficam automaticamente em condições de apresentar ou de colocar as respectivas questões. Dizer ainda que se seguirá a esta sessão de abertura um momento cultural com a atuação do Conservatório Regional de Setúbal. Alguns elementos sobre esta estrutura cultural da cidade de Setúbal. Fundada em 1988, o Conservatório Regional de Setúbal, ao longo da sua existência, tem vindo a ministrar ensino da música a milhares de alunos, dos mais variados escalões etários, contribuindo para a sua formação humana, cultural e artística. Para além das atividades escolares, o Conservatório Regional de Música de Setúbal tem procurado contribuir para o desenvolvimento cultural e artístico da comunidade em que se insere, colaborando com as mais variadas instituições oficiais e particulares. Hoje apresenta-nos aqui um pouco do trabalho desenvolvido pelo ensemble de oferta complementar do professor Eduardo Jordão. Esta é uma manifestação cultural, uma instituição da cidade, com um trabalho relevante e é para nós, Comissão Organizadora, um particular gosto iniciar esta conferência com o testemunho deste trabalho cultural realizado por esta instituição, por esta associação cultural e, portanto, passaria neste momento, estamos ainda um pouco antes do horário, começámos exata e rigorosamente à hora, mas certamente que teremos aqui que fazer, se calhar, uma breve pausa para a entrada deste grupo cultural. Entretanto, já foi aqui dado pelo Sr. Presidente da Câmara um pouco do historial da plataforma de Setúbal, com a representação e a participação que o Sr. Presidente aqui referiu, mas talvez seja justo sublinhar que a plataforma de Setúbal é uma iniciativa ao tempo da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal. Foi a Câmara Municipal de Setúbal que agregou todas estas instituições que atualmente integram a plataforma de Setúbal e, portanto, se não houvesse o empenho e se não tivesse havido a iniciativa congregadora, quer do Serviço Municipal de Proteção Civil, quer da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal, naturalmente que a plataforma não teria existido e não estávamos aqui na terceira edição desta conferência. E, portanto, sublinhava aqui isto e, naturalmente, que em nome das restantes entidades que integram a plataforma e a comissão organizadora desta conferência, queria testemunhar ao Sr. Presidente da Câmara os agradecimentos de todo o apoio, nomeadamente para a organização desta conferência, que tem sido dado ao desenvolvimento do trabalho e ao cumprimento da missão plasmada no protocolo de constituição da plataforma de Setúbal. Sendo assim, não sei se estaremos em condições já de iniciar a apresentação do Conservatório Regional de Setúbal, ainda assim adiantaria que, sob o tema que o Sr. Presidente da Câmara já referiu, Turismo e Segurança, nós iremos ter, durante esta manhã, começar a primeira sessão, a seguir imediatamente à intervenção do Conservatório de Setúbal, teremos uma pausa para café de meia hora e depois, às 11 horas, teremos a intervenção da representante, neste caso da Organização Mundial do Turismo, Alexandra Piente, que é diretora regional do Departamento Europeu, exatamente desta organização, a Organização Mundial do Turismo, que irá subordinar a sua intervenção, embora via à distância, desafios societais para o futuro do turismo. Seguir-se-á depois um painel, um primeiro painel, se bem que a primeira intervenção será via vídeo, que terá a participação da representante do Fórum Europeu de Segurança Urbana e também da editora freelancer da revista Turismo Watch. A seguir a estas duas intervenções, então, teremos um período de discussão. Este período de discussão tem em vista precisamente a colocação das questões que há pouco já vos referi, através da aplicação, que o moderador, que será Mário Macedo, vice-presidente do Centro de Estudos de Intervenção e Proteção Civil, fará a gestão dessas questões e colocará aos respectivos oradores para que formulem as suas considerações ou respostas às questões colocadas. Depois seguir-se-á o intervalo para almoço, entre as 12h30 e as 14h. A sessão de tarde teremos mais 2 oradores, portanto, que irão subordinar-se a determinadas, mais 3 oradores, com 3 comunicações distintas. Uma será sobre a renaturalização do turismo de sustentabilidade, cujo orador será o Pedro Prata, do Team Leader da Associação Rio-Lingen Ibéria, e depois a sustentabilidade e turismo será entre orador Jorge Umbelino, da Escola Superior de Hotelaria e Turismo do Estoril, do Estoril, exatamente, e depois teremos uma última, terceira intervenção, Estratégia Turística do município de Setúbal, case study do programa Rábida Sem Carros, que será orador Ricardo Oliveira, adjunto do Sr. Presidente da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal. Seguir-se-á, então, um novo período de discussão com o mesmo modelo de organização que acabei de vos descrever. O moderador desta sessão será António Gonçalves, diretor da Escola Profissional EduGEP. Seguir-se-á depois hoje, e portanto completando o programa de hoje, teremos a apresentação de resumos, 5 resumos que se apresentaram ao convite para submissão de resumos subordinados ao tema ou aos tópicos do tema da conferência, e esses 5 resumos serão apresentados e terá a moderação de Ângela Santos, do Instituto de Geografia e Ordenamento do Território. Finalmente, a sessão de hoje termina com uma mesa redonda, subordinada ao tema os recursos humanos no setor do turismo, e serão oradores Sara Pimpão, do Grupo Aerofirmes, Lourdes Calisto, da Escola Superior de Hotelaria do Estoril, e Luís Trindade, do Sindicato dos Trabalhadores da Indústria de Hotelaria, Turismo, Restaurantes e Similares do Sul. Esta última sessão de hoje será moderada por Francisco Alves Rito, diretor do jornal O Setubalense. Amanhã, pelas 9h, teremos um programa que iremos mais tarde recordar. Então, partindo do pressuposto de que estaremos em condições, muito em breve, de dar início à intervenção da atuação do Conservatório Regional de Setúbal, é a vez, então, da sua atuação.
Obrigadíssimo.
Então, em nome da Comissão Organizadora da Conferência, entregar aqui ao Maestro uma lembrança da mesma conferência e, ao mesmo tempo, agradecer-lhe a excelência deste início da nossa conferência.
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado. Obrigado por convite.
Bom, segue-se o período de intervalo e, portanto, café temos aqui para quem quiser e quem desejar. Regressamos daqui a meia hora, portanto, agradecemos que assim aconteça daqui a meia hora.
Ora, muito bom dia a todos. Vamos com uns minutos confortáveis de avanço em relação ao programado, o que não deixa de ser uma novidade neste tipo de organizações. Normalmente andamos sempre a correr contra o tempo, neste momento é o tempo que corre contra nós. Mas ainda bem que assim é, teremos porventura mais tempo para as questões no final, que relembro que elas deverão ser colocadas a partir de qualquer momento, portanto não têm que esperar pelo fim da intervenção, podem ser colocadas em qualquer momento na plataforma Pigeon, podem descarregar, estão ali os QRs fixados, podem descarregar a aplicação e colocar as questões diretamente, e que depois, quando entramos na fase de comentários e de questões, portanto as questões irão surgindo normalmente pela ordem pela quais foram introduzidas, e os oradores irão dar a sua opinião, ou clarificar, ou responder às questões que foram colocadas. Portanto, sintam-se à vontade para colocar questões em qualquer momento, portanto, não têm necessariamente que esperar pelo fim da apresentação, ou pelo fim do conjunto de apresentações. Eu aproveitava para chamar aqui para junto de mim a professora Vivian Gravenberg, não sei se... Hello, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
Just choose a seat. Any place. E aproveitava também para chamar a professora Liathin. Hello, good morning, welcome. Thank you. Just have a seat, please. So my Dutch and my is not the very best one. I'll try to communicate with you in English, if it's okay for you. I can do it in Portuguese if you want.
It's going to be difficult, I think.
Yeah, I believe it will be. Yeah, as difficult as Dutch is for me.
Okay.
Okay, we just get even.
But Portuguese, at least, is a very pretty language. So
Okay.
Dutch isn't, I don't think.
Ok, nós, ora bem, no início eu apresentaria já as duas colegas de painel. Não, já vamos. A professora Vivian Gravenberg.
Yes.
I tried all the night, so in
good.
front of a mirror, tried to be convincing.
Gravenberg.
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 Yes. Yeah, Dutch. It's different from German. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, é mestre em ciências de investigação criminológica, com especialização no perfil ambiental e criminológico. Estudou na Universidade Livre de Amsterdão, onde foi uma estudante ativa no curso de mestrado em criminologia espacial, durante 3 anos. Neste curso, os estudantes estudaram vários temas e vários princípios e teorias no perfil geográfico e individual. Também faz investigação no equilíbrio entre cidadãos, entre as necessidades de segurança e os seus direitos à privacidade. Vivian também trabalhou no desenvolvimento multimédia em plataformas e-learning e web design. os seus parceiros de trabalho. Descrevem-na como muito entusiasta, com grande vontade de aprender, associativa e muito criativa. Trabalhou em vários projetos durante o seu tempo enquanto consultor júnior de coordenação de projetos, assistente e investigador no Instituto Neerlandês para Tecnologia, Segurança e Segurança. Os dois termos, nós temos uma única palavra, mas é a tradução de Safety and Security. I think it's all. Am I right?
You have one word for safety and security?
Yes.
Yes, we have the same in the Netherlands, actually. It's one word, but in so safety is more natural hazards, and security is actually protecting from man-made threats, we would say. But,
well, we have the technical security for safety,
yeah, exactly.
And we have physical security for security.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Yeah, we have the same in Dutch. It translates the same.
Now, Lefkin tem mestrado em Geografia com prática relevante na área das relações públicas e comunicação, right? Experiência de trabalho em política climática a nível nacional e a nível internacional desde o ano de 2002. You start very young.
2002.
2002? Yeah. How old were you? 3 years then?
No. Well, I'm born in 88.
Okay.
I don't know where you have
It
that
doesn't
from.
look like that, but okay. É assessora do Ministério Federal para o Desenvolvimento e investigação da República Federal da Alemanha. Right?
Exactly.
Não, agora, nós iremos iniciar este painel com uma apresentação que será feita via vídeo da professora Alessandra Priante, diretora do Departamento Europeu da Organização Mundial de Turismo das Nações Unidas, com o tema Desafios Societais para o Futuro do Turismo. Podem? Ok, aí está. Julgo que com som ficaria tudo nada melhor.
Bom dia a todos. Uma saudação cordial à terceira edição da Conferência Internacional de Riscos de Segurança e Cidadania. E muito obrigada ao presidente da Câmara Municipal de Setúbal, Dr. André Martins, e à plataforma de Setúbal pelo convite. Eu gostaria de estar com você na bela Setúbal agora. Da próxima vez prometo que estarei com vocês pessoalmente e não por vídeo. And now I'm gonna switch into English to share with you some interesting, I hope, thoughts and consideration and information coming from the United Nations World Tourism Organization that I hereby represent. My name is Alessandra Priante and I am the director for the region of Europe at the UNWTO. Very quickly, I wanted to share with you the thoughts that I was supposed to share in person today regarding the impacts of tourism, the changes and the impact at the society level. First of all, we always speak sustainability, and one major aspect of sustainability is the social aspect. We've seen over the years that tourism has brought very positive elements, but mostly also negative elements. And many people, when they complain about, for example, an excess of tourists, they also talk about the depopulation effect, loss of traditional cultures, because, for example, in cities like Venice or other cities, the center has been totally replaced by souvenir shops. The commodification of local traditions, I mean, everyone seems to be expecting the same thing, so the local populations are adjusting to this form of receiving guests. Economic dependence, because obviously when a destination strongly depends on tourism, like in the case of COVID, the moment the tourism is not there, the economy just goes flat. Conflicts between tourists and locals, which we've seen in many destinations. The most loud ones were Barcelona, for example, or Sevilla, or other destinations. But even in Lisbon, I think there's some very interesting movements that are going against the so-called trolleys and the Airbnbs, and the fact that basically the center of the city is totally destined to an accommodation for tourists. Obviously, this has an impact in safety and security, accessibility, and causes what everyone talks as over-tourism. Some say, and I am among those that say, that over-tourism does not exist. Over-tourism is just tourism managed badly. So where do we come in as United Nations? First of all, we have developed a series of strategies throughout the years, but I would like to bring you to the latest ones. The greatest element of the challenges, let's say, that were brought in by the pandemic with the total halt of tourism, so therefore our possibility to travel was completely limited and in some cases forbidden. We stayed home, we stayed domestic, we stayed nearby, and we rediscovered our villages. So what was supposed to be the year of tourism for all development, which was 2020, became a strategy, a pillar of our global action with the member states and in the world of tourism, which is tourism for rural development that tackles a certain amount of issues, helping destinations to develop what is outside the main point of attraction. Among these, allow me to share with you the success of our edition of Best Tourism Villages, which is basically, let's say, a competition, which is not a competition because nobody really wins anything, but it's a recognition that we give to villages all over the world that respect certain criteria. Of course, being acknowledged as the best tourism village is just a beginning, and it's, I would say, a very important communication element. But the good thing is that all these villages from all over the world are put together in a network, highlighting once again the importance of preserving our traditions, because when you go to a destination like a village, you have to be part of the destination with the people. Discover and promote the local gastronomy and the cultural heritage and the local elements of culture, but also the natural resources of the destination. And what we try to do, we try to bring prosperity by enhancing the public-private partnership, something that is incredibly essential when we talk about the sustainable development of tourism. Another key element, a part of our activity, is looking at the impact on climate and on the environment of tourism. And so we are part of a larger initiative, which is One Planet. It's a UN initiative. And we have created a series of initiatives like Glasgow Declaration, the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, Hotel Energy Solutions, that are aiming at creating a measurement system, a framework, whereby either the hospitality sector or the governments or other actors in the tourism value chain would actually measure their impact and eventually reduce it when looking at a forward, let's say, better future with less struggles when it comes to environmental and energetic, for example, sustainability. In order to do all this, what is very important whenever we set objective of sustainability is the measurement. So we also have set up the Measuring Sustainable Tourism Framework, which is an official UN standard to measure sustainability. You have a strategy, Setúbal, for achieving sustainable tourism. Come to us and we will help you define your criteria, your KPIs, your measurement elements. Technological disruption, innovation is also what really drives the change. And we've seen in these years that it is able to drive the change much more quickly, much faster, and in a more effective way. Involving as well a part of the society which is really needed, which is the younger party, SMEs, the generations that are just graduating or about to graduate, those that have innovative ideas that can have an impact precisely to achieve all the objectives that I was highlighting before and solving the issues that I pitched in the beginning in terms of the impact of tourism. Obviously, throughout time, we have used all these initiatives with thematics, but probably the next thematic should be, once again, over-tourism. We also take care of the legal framework. We try to advise countries on the best way to protect the tourists. We've all seen what happened during COVID. People were stranded, tickets not reimbursed, not knowing what to do. If you get sick in a destination, who's going to take care of you? Who's going to reimburse you if you don't have an insurance? The insurances that were refusing to take into consideration packages that would cover, for example, COVID assistance. So we have developed, together with 101 member states, this international code for the protection of tourists, which sets the minimum international standards for the protection of tourists in emergency situation, preserving the consumer rights of the tourist, and really allowing the governments and the public and private stakeholders to take an initiative to make sure that in situations like the ones of COVID, but not only, tourists are well taken care of. Same happens with the Framework Convention on Tourist Ethics, which is an independent body that we have, and our, let's say, social consideration goes way forward because we are very, very concerned, together with UN Women, for the women empowerment in tourism. We know that 53%, for example, of the European workforce of tourism is women, not necessarily in the highest of positions. This is an issue, and I'm sure all the women present in the audience today will agree with me. We need recognition, training, and we need empowerment. So we have created different initiatives and a lot of publications, especially trying to give guidelines for the public sector, but also for the private sector, to define a gender-inclusive strategy that works. Culture is also a great element of our operations, and we are very focused on the preservation of cultural heritage, mainly on the conservation of the traditions of indigenous communities. Once again, we go back to my first slide. Whenever we're being tourists in a destination, it is very important not to, let's say, expect something standard, and therefore the governments that develop the destination need to be able to preserve. One of the ways to do that is involve local communities in the tourism strategies themselves. When we talk about inclusion, we have to talk about accessibility. And therefore, it is very important that every destination takes into account to be accessible. We have developed the ISO standard for accessible tourism for all. And that is incredibly important. Many countries are adhering, and Portugal is one of them. And it is very important that you have standards to be reflected in the way you shape your offer. The access is just not just hospitality, it's connectivity, it's everything else, it's information. Let's please remember that accessible destinations, first of all, have to be incredibly accessible via communication. So you need to know very clearly what to expect and what not to expect in a destination in order to help the people with disabilities to be able to choose that destination. We're about to do, once again, after a long time, a beautiful conference, which is our International Conference on Accessible Tourism in Europe. is going to be taking place in San Marino in November. We really hope that any of you who's interested in best practices for accessibility in tourism is going to join us. I said before, and I hope some of you here agrees with me, that over-tourism does not exist. There's no such thing as over-tourism. It's tourism managed badly, which becomes the over. The fact that you're just receiving people without planning in advance how many you can actually have, or how many do you actually want. So the whole point of over-tourism is actually shifting on to proper management of destinations. I really hope that I gave you some food for thought, and I do hope that you will have a very fruitful discussion, and I'm looking forward to receiving the conclusions. Once again, muito obrigada. Thank you very much for having me, and see you soon. Bye.
Well, despite you're not hearing me, thank you very much for your presentation anyway. So I ask now Vivian, please, to make your presentation. Do you want to make it from here, or you can go use the location?
Is it okay if I sit? Because I think that's
okay.
being, yeah.
The way you feel more comfortable.
Okay, well, I think this is a nice companionship. First of all, let me explain that I am from the Dutch Institute of Safe and Secure Spaces, as you already mentioned. But today I will be here on behalf of the European Forum for Urban Security, also known as EFUS. And EFUS and DIS work together a lot, which I will go into a little bit later. Can we go to the next slide?
Next slide, please.
O passa-slide está em cima do púlpito.
Do I have to do that there? Oh.
Okay.
Oh, I'll go there. Sorry, thank you. All right, so what I will be discussing today first is what is EFUS. I am on their behalf here, but who are they and what do they do? Which activities do they conduct? Who is DIS? I want to talk a little bit about urban security because that's why we're here today all together, and about linking urban security and tourism and how we as DIS, together with EFUS, conduct all kinds of activities that aim at urban security, specifically in tourism. So, what is EFUS? EFUS is the European Forum for Urban Security, and they are actually the only European network that is dedicated to fostering discussion, cooperation and support among local and regional authorities, specifically in the field of crime prevention and urban security. EFUS actually has 250 cities as members of EFUS. Setúbal, I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. Setúbal is one of them. And the 250 cities are actually spread among 17 EU member states. We also promote a holistic approach to urban security, which involves all local actors and citizens in the co-production of policies. So they get together, make a roundtable, and involve as many important stakeholders as possible to create these policies. Their main goals are to affirm the central role of local elected representatives and their roles as guarantors of democratic principles. It considers security to be a fundamental right for citizens in all EU member states, and it advocates policies that guarantee the protection of human rights. We are very active in that as well. And EFUS chooses prevention instead of repression as a rational and strategic approach to security, which promotes social cohesion in the long term because, as always, preventing is better than healing afterwards, so that we share that vision. These are some of the topics that EFUS discusses with their 250 cities and members. And the main points that we also discuss are innovation and technology, organized crime, police and justice, public spaces, well, actually almost the entire list we share with EFUS, those interests. So then, who is this? This is the Dutch Institute for Safe and Secure Spaces. We are a non-profit organization that focuses on safe and secure spaces, which are private spaces, personal spaces, and public spaces. Those three areas we focus on mostly. And we focus on collaborating in multiple helix, which means like the helix is a central going down with its research, local authorities, etc. The general idea of multiple helix, which is a difficult term, is get together as many important stakeholders together at the table, creating policies or frameworks. And by doing that, you have co-created projects. So you together work on something that might improve the security in certain spaces. We do a lot of social and technological innovative projects. So we focus on both those terms, but I think the main thing that we do is try to be innovative. And I think I can say that in this crowd, but we try to be the pink fluffy unicorn in a world of gray. So that's mainly our goal. This is active from idea through research and development. So we do a lot of research and development projects to business development and then actually operational implementation. So that is a very important part, of course, because an idea is great, but the most important part is what happens with the idea and how do you make sure that you can implement this idea actually. So very shortly, this has 3 board members. Peter van der Krommert, who's sitting there, he's the Director of Strategy and Innovations. Anna van der Stok, who's not here, but she's Director of Operations and Programs. And myself, Director of Research and Marketing. And by seeing Peter's face, I actually thought that I forgot something, because before I wanted to present, I wanted to thank everyone. So I wanted to thank the organization. And I specifically wanted to thank these young musical talents that I saw on this stage. I think it's a very cool way to open a conference, and it gives a different meaning to the word keynote speaker, which is a joke by Peter Notes. And I also wanted to thank the translation, which is actually super helpful in creating these synergies that the mayor mentioned. So because of this translation, you notice immediately that the conversation becomes a lot more easy and that we get to talk on the same level a lot more. So thank you for that. So this, well, cooperating, we think is the best thing there is. Again, with the whole multiple helix, co-creation, getting people on the same table, talking about security issues, we think is the most effective way in tackling security issues. And that is why we have a memorandum of understanding with the best partner there is in multiple helix cooperation, which is AFUS, which I explained what they do. So we work a lot together with AFUS in different kinds of projects. So, about urban security. Well, again, I just wanted to show you what moves us. I talked about we're the Institute for Safe and Secure Spaces. What we mean by that is private space, public space, and personal space. And all of these fields of knowledge and interest, they kind of overlap. Some have the same links and some only link to one specific type of place. But what we focus on in our active projects right now is mostly crime prevention through environmental design, also known as security by design. But then, I don't know, some of you might be aware of the whole CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, but you have old-fashioned CEPTED and you have new-fashioned CEPTED. And we focus on the new-fashioned, which also incorporates social aspects. So if you look at a neighborhood, it's very interesting to look at how can we design a place that makes it feel safe, that has well-lit areas, but how can we also make sure that this place facilitates social cohesion and social projects and gives youngsters a sense of safety and security. So that's all the things we try to focus on. And together with AFUS, we aim to empower local and regional authorities with, for instance, theoretical knowledge or practical tools to ensure the security of public spaces and the protection of soft targets. I will explain later what a soft target is. And we do that by giving training, for instance. We gave trainings in multiple cities all throughout Europe. We conduct vulnerability assessments, so what makes a specific public space, for instance, specifically vulnerable in case of an attack or in case of any type of crime or man-made threat. What makes them vulnerable? And we facilitate the multiple helix approach to urban security, so we practically organize getting people around the table from different disciplines, for instance. So you get local law enforcement at the table, a municipality, someone from the fire department, urban planners, etc. And what we see is that it's very helpful if you're talking about urban security, that you get all of these different perspectives. And we give very practical advice. So if we go to a certain place, a certain area, and we see that there are a lot of crime problems that need to be tackled, we can actually give advice like, okay, so these are the things that you could do, of course, depending on the specific situation. So this is our actual team on urban security. We have Paul van Zomeren, people that read a lot about crime prevention through environmental design or security by design will probably know his name. He wrote a lot of articles on SEPTED and security by design. He's one of the experts. And we have Lorenz Schätzle, who's also a member of the German branch of EFUS, which is DEFUS. And we have me, which you know about me. So before I go into what we do in the projects with EFUS, I just wanted to give you a 5-minute, very quick criminology lecture. So what we believe as criminologists is that everyone basically geographically acts the same. So we all have this pattern that we have in our social lives. So you have your school or your work in some area, then you have your home, and you have any type of activity like social activity or your shopping mall, whatever. In these 3 points, which we call your awareness space, so it's basically your mental map of your environment, everyone kind of moves in the same map, always. Which is actually the same for people that commit crimes. They also move in the same areas, because it's just basic human behavior. So I will not explain how, but for instance, if you have a serial attacker on the loose, you can actually predict where they live on a radius of 500 meters even, if you have all of the data of where the crimes were linked or etc. What the routine activity says is a very old 1979 theory. It explains that in every crime there are always 3 elements. You have a suitable target, you have a likely offender, and you have the absence of a capable guardian. And I hope I can explain this well, but a likely offender, so he's not a motivated offender yet, can become a motivated offender if there is the absence of a capable guardian, so no one around, no cameras, no video surveillance, no security measures, etc. If there's an absence of a capable guardian, which in itself actually makes that there is a suitable target. But because there is no capable guardian, a specific target becomes more suitable to their attack. So a very basic example of that, we have a likely offender who's not yet motivated, but he will be motivated because there's no CCTV around, and there are no individuals walking around looking out. And there's a car with a window down and a phone in plain sight. So this theory says everyone that will pass by and that is a likely offender, there's such a big opportunity, almost all of the offenders will seize the opportunity. So that's very basic criminological theory, and we try to apply that in trainings. I mentioned a soft target earlier, so suitable target or a soft target. A soft target is actually specifically for physical places, because a suitable target can be a person or a place. If we're talking about a soft target, we talk about a place. And targets are considered soft when there are a lot of people, for instance. So you have a high crowd density, or there's a huge symbolic value to a place, because, for instance, if we take the Promenade d'Anglais in Nice, which is a very well-known area, it has symbolic value, and there are a lot of people. So it makes the target soft. It has these elements that makes them attractive for a possible offender. These types of soft targets, or also known as public spaces of interest for the attacker, are transport hubs, for instance, squares, shopping areas, nightlife areas, cultural venues, business venues, places of worship, which I will tell you about a little later, and institutional venues. And what I would advise you, if you're interested in this subject of how do I better protect my public space, I would advise you to look at the Protect Project documentary. It's a 50-minute documentary explaining what kind of cool, innovative tools you can use to better protect your public space, and how to actually do that. Linking tourism and urban security, I'm now going back to our cooperation with EFUS. We did the Secu for All project. A few of our partners are actually in the room. It was a very interesting project, and there we trained local and regional authorities how to better protect their public space. So we trained them, and what we also did, we gave an online training first in COVID times, so it was very difficult, and then we actually went to these municipalities, and we went to specific soft targets, or public spaces of interest. And what we actually saw was that, especially in the very touristic areas, beaches, for instance, we went to these soft targets, and what we saw was that during summer, they have, in a lot of these areas, they have almost 5 times as much crowd density as during winter. So that gives you a huge problem, because if you make your plans during winter, and you have a whole different setting during summer, and you do a risk assessment in winter, you're not really able to predict what's going to happen during summer. So what we did there was do all the risk assessments in all types of scenarios. So during winter, during the day, during the night, during the afternoon, during the bar closing time or bar opening time, what are the specific time slots that are vulnerable, that cause vulnerability. So that's what we did in some of these areas. And what we saw was that you have very different types of threats, of course. So during summer, you have more an increase in sex crimes, or more pickpocketing, more physical assaults, higher terroristic threat, especially on the boulevards, that don't have vehicle attack protection, for instance, or mitigation techniques. So what we did there was just give very practical advice on each of these topics. For instance, if you have a huge increase in nightlife areas, in sex crimes, make sure that you have well-lit beaches, which might sound like a very simple technique, but it's actually quite effective. Or you can make sure that if you have a lot of bar fights, that you put red filters on the lights so that it lowers cortisol levels, so people get less stressed after the closing of the bars, etc. So these kinds of tips we gave there. And what I wanted to also explain was, so we did the vulnerability and risk assessments in all types of situations. These are 2 examples of where we went. We involved all kinds of different types, and we try to make it playful, because that's what we do is this. We can imagine that, for instance, urban planners who've never done a risk assessment in their lives, by hearing the word risk assessment, they might be demotivated. So we try to make it as fun as possible, using, for instance, public space bingo, which might sound ridiculous, but it's actually it's proven to be very effective. Because what we did, we had bingo, you have the numbers, and the numbers corresponded to specific terms associated with risk assessment. And they had to remember these terms and explain what the terms were, otherwise they had to sing a song if they weren't able. So they were really very active in trying to investigate all of these terms and making sure that they knew what the terms were. Also the physical risk assessment we did with stickers, and we tried to make it very creative so that people became active. And in the end, we also added a competition element because we really saw that actually helps. We kind of did the same in the Prosperous project, which is a project that is specifically aimed at training representatives of faith-based institutions. So it's about the protection of places of worship. And what we did there was that we heard that because they are actually, they have a very busy schedule, so doing a risk assessment for every single religious event they have is such a big task that they wanted to narrow it down. So what we did there was to make a VAT light, so a vulnerability assessment tool light version, with just a checklist. We narrowed it down to 3 zones. We have the interior of the place of worship, we have the immediate exterior, and we have the surroundings. So what can I do in these 3 zones? Just checking basic security measures. Do I have video surveillance? No, I don't have it, but why don't I have it? Because it's very difficult to get a permit, because it's an ancient building. In some countries, it's very difficult to get a permit. How can I resolve that? Well, that's what we did here, so that we explained how they can tackle these very basic issues, because we saw in multiple surveys in 11 countries that they all kind of had the same problems. So that's what we did in the Prosperous project. And that was my presentation on linking urban security to tourism, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Vivian. It's a very interesting communication and a very up-to-date theme that should concern everyone in Europe, not only in Europe. Thank you very much for your work, and it's very interesting, very indeed. Now, Leah, so you want to say?
Yeah, I'm going to sit, unless you want to see a German woman giving birth on stage. So thanks for having me today. I'm talking about kind of another crime, because it's the crime of global injustice, so to say. And I'm talking about the nexus of tourism and development. And I first want to start with some facts about tourism. So tourism is very important to the economy, with a constant rise in travel numbers. Before COVID, in 7 years, travel numbers rise by 50%, which is quite a lot for any economic sector. International tourists prefer to go to the Asian Pacific region when they go to the Global South, followed by the Americas, which is mainly the Caribbean islands. And the major choice of transportation still is the airplane, by far more than 50%. However, it is also difficult to choose another way of transportation if you go to the Global South, of course. Well, tourism is a major driver of job creation. There are 330 million jobs which are directly or indirectly connected to tourism. Directly is, for example, when you work in a hotel. Indirectly is, for example, if you work in a restaurant or in retail. And in numbers, this means that 15 German tourists create 1 job in a developing country. Well, all those tourists, of course, they spend a lot of money when they are traveling. So it's 1 in 3 developing countries which really remain, they are dependent on tourism as the main source of foreign exchange. But also when you look at tourism worldwide, it has a huge impact on the economy, making 10% of the global GDP. So let's take a look at the impact of tourism on developing countries, because all of that sounds like tourism is really a great driver for development, doesn't it? And yes, there are very huge impacts on and positive impacts on the economy. I already talked about the GDP. In the Global South, it makes even more than 10% to the GDP, so it's a very, very important factor for the economy of those poorer countries. You can even say every euro that is spent on tourism in developing countries brings back €1.42 to the GDP, so that is a plus of 42% with every euro spent. Also, developing countries become more integrated into the global economic cycles by international investments in touristic infrastructure, for example, and also with every 10th job dependent on tourism, it's a really important factor for creating jobs. However, there's another side as well, because the question is, how does the local population really benefit from it? And yeah, tourism is still well known as a sector with very precarious working conditions, especially in the Global South, and it has a lot of seasonality, and as you can see, more than half of all people working in the tourism sector work in the informal sector, and for example in Asia and the Pacific region it's even 75%. This means it's people without any contract, without any social security, without any labor rights. Also, these people with informal occupations are 3 times as likely to lose their job compared to formal workers. And during COVID, of course, when there was no tourism at all, 1 in 5 jobs got lost due to COVID. And in Africa and the Asian Pacific region, it's even 33%. So every 3rd job was lost. So what can we learn about this? It's basically about diversification. This means there are many, many countries in the Global South which really just focus their entire economies on this one sector, tourism. And when there is no tourism at all, of course, they are facing enormous problem. And this does not only mean that the GDP is decreasing, like there's no money coming in the country, but also there are many people which are dependent on their income from tourism, and they don't get any money at all, they lose their jobs, and they don't have any savings to come through this time when no tourism is there. So, but let's go to the positive effects again. Because tourism has really great impacts on governments. It improves political stability and political participation, and it is already a key driver of job creation for women, young people, and migrant workers. In the Global South, 75% of workers in the tourism sector are women, which is such a high number and makes tourism an outstanding sector for female employment. The sector is also an important entry point for young people. So when you look at the world, the majority of people working in tourism are below 35 years, and more than half of them are even below 25 years. And it is estimated that in OECD countries, most people, or not most people, but 25% of people in the hospitality sector are of foreign origin, like migrants, for example. So tourism is a great chance for people to enter the labor market, and a lot of them will seek for other opportunities later, some will not, depending on the working conditions, of course. However, when we see women, young people, and migrant workers, these are especially vulnerable groups. So they often face precarious working conditions in developing countries. They are overrepresented in low-skilled occupations, and in low-paid occupations. So you can say less than one position, less than 1 in 4 management positions is held by a woman. So there is a high gender inequality still. Also, the informality of the tourism sector is linked to sexual abuse of women and children because there is no security given. However, there is an increasing demand. Thank you. There is an increasing demand of Western tourists who want to make very authentic encounters in the countries they visit. They want to have adventures there with the local population, and this is actually a good thing because it fosters intercultural understanding and exchange, and it creates awareness of global injustice, and people see that there is injustice and poverty, and they want to help and donate, and all this is actually a good thing. But unfortunately, this desire to help is increasingly exploited. So maybe some of you saw the film Slumdog Millionaire, and you know that, for example, children are forced to beg and are even intentionally disfigured. And another example is, for example, orphanage tourism. It's especially prevalent in Cambodia, where you have a lot of orphanages plopping up in touristic areas, but more than 80% of those children there, they do have parents. They are not even parentless, but they are taken away to serve as a tourist attraction. So you have to know about this, and you have to do something about this, and yeah, it's a duty of governments to restrict this, of course. So, the sector has a significant impact on the environment as well, and definitely not just the bad one, because the beauty of nature is a major pull factor for tourism. People come to enjoy nature, to enjoy beaches, to enjoy the rainforest and things like that. So governments and local people are much more interested in creating protected areas and preservations, which has already led to 15% of the world's surface already being declared a protected area, which is quite a success, and the trend is rising. Also, the interest is especially high since the economic value is can outweigh harmful investments. So it is better for a government to save a piece of nature than, for example, allow deforestation. And this number underlines this, because every dollar a government invests in protected areas and nature-based tourism, for every dollar, $6 come back. So that's a plus of 600%. And of course, this is very persuading. Also, wildlife tourism is 5 times more lucrative compared to illegal wildlife trade. So tourism is a great chance to end poaching, for example. Nevertheless, tourism still requires massive amounts of resources and generates high emissions, and therefore is a serious driver of climate change. So every US dollar spent for tourism causes 1 kilogram of CO2 equivalent, so 1 kilogram of emissions, so to say. And this is quite high because it's 25% more than every other sector in the world. And the reason for this is mainly traveling by airplane. Air travel currently accounts for 5% of global CO2 emissions, and air traffic is rising steadily. So when there will be no change in the future, its share will rise to 22% by 2050. Let's go to the social effects. Yes, tourism has some great effects on education and literacy in the countries where there is a lot of tourism. It decreases the poverty rate, and at least in theory, it improves the infrastructure also for local people, and the access to water, electricity, and internet, because that's all things you need for tourists. This is what tourists need, and of course the local population benefits from it. In theory, because actually the high consumption of resources such as water, land, and food can trigger conflicts. As you can see here, the statistic shows the land use by tourism, and you can see until 2050, the land that is needed for tourism is 4 times as high as it was 2010. Also, the economic effects, like fishermen and farmers, for example, they can benefit from tourism because